Howdy folks, and welcome back to another Rank 'em All video here on the Ruthless Metal channel. And in today's video we're going to take on Ozzy Osbourne's solo band. And ever since Ozzy was fired from Black Sabbath back in 1979, the Prince of Darkness has had his own equally successful band. He has released 12 studio albums, if you count his cover album. And other than that, I don't think that this man needs much of a presentation. So if you're an Ozzy fan, then smash that like button so that this video can be recommended to other Ozzy fans. And now it's time to rank Ozzy's full discography, from the worst to the best. And the worst Ozzy album is in my opinion Black Rain from 2007. And I'm not even sure if I gave this album a listen to when it came out, because I felt I had better things to do than to check out an aging rock star like Ozzy, who tried to stay hip with the kids. But since I'm ranking all of his albums, I've spent some time lately with this record, but it is kind of what I expected. Zakk Wylde trying to emulate the sound of Black Sabbath, but with an ultra modern packaging, and Ozzy's vocals being compressed on top of that. Ozzy has managed to stay relevant by adapting to the changes before, but I don't know if I like this version of Ozzy that much. And up until this point at least, Black Rain was the last album to feature guitar player and longtime collaborator Zakk Wylde. But for me, Black Rain is Ozzy's worst album, and I think it's highly skippable, so next. In 10th place we have Scream from 2010, and on this album Ozzy had a new playmate in guitarist Gus G. And for a long time it seemed like this was going to be Ozzy's last record, since he didn't record anything new for 10 years after the release of this album. And I didn't listen much to the last 3 or 4 records when they came out, because I didn't like the modern approach of these records. And there is some impressive musicianship on this album, but I can't say that I enjoy this record that much, so next. In 9th place we have Ordinary Man from 2020, and this is Ozzy's latest record to date. And from a metal perspective, this album is highly average. But I kinda liked the music video that they did for Ordinary Man. I thought it was cool seeing Ozzy looking back on his life and career. You know, that video where he sits in a cinema and looks at pictures and videos of his career. I thought that was very nice and touching, even if the record itself is more or less skippable. And this album was also a collaboration with a long list of musicians and vocalists. Everyone from Duff McKagan and Slash from Guns N' Roses to Elton John and even rapper Post Malone. And I don't know what else to say about this record than that, so next. In 8th place we have Down to Earth from 2001, and what strikes me when listening to this album is the tone of it. It sounds so much more modern in comparison to all previous records. It was like they took the classic Black Sabbath sound and they tried to make it more modern and up to date. And The Dreamer was an enormous hit from this record, and it sounds almost like a Beatles song or something like that, but in a more modern style of course. So there aren't only heavy songs on this record, and I would say that this album is probably Ozzy's best record from this side of the millennium. So next. In the mid-90s, Ozzy released the album Ozzmosis, and this album was criticized for not being up to the standard of more or less all previous Ozzy records. But still, it sold over 3 million copies, which is insane numbers for 1995. And this album has a heavier tone to it, that 90s tone that we saw on more or less all metal albums during this time period. But I wouldn't say that this album is completely ruined by it. The intro track Perry Mason is actually pretty good, but the rest of the album were just ballads and more or less 90s alternative rock / metal songs. I Just Want You was a huge hit from this record, but overall I think that this album was a disappointment when it came out. But in comparison to a few of his more recent albums, I still hold this somewhere in the middle of Ozzy's catalog. And maybe this was the album that bridged the 80s era of the band with the more contemporary albums. So next. In 6th place we have No Rest for the Wicked from 1988. And this is the album that I've listened to the least of those 80s records, maybe because of those horrible sounding effects on this album. But otherwise I would say that this is a more metallic album than Bark at the Moon, for example, that had more keyboards on it. And this was also the first album to feature Zakk Wylde, who has been working on and off with Ozzy ever since. And the keyboardist John Sinclair was also new here, and the bassist Bob Daisley also returned to the band after being away for a while. The songs on No Rest for the Wicked is of a varied quality in my opinion, so that's why it's my least favorite of those 80s albums. Next. In 5th place we have No More Tears from 1991, and this was the final Ozzy album to feature drummer Randy Castillo and longtime bassist and songwriter Bob Daisley. No More Tears had several big hits on it, like I Don't Want to Change the World, Mama I'm Coming Home, No More Tears, and Hellraiser. And they sold about 1 trillion copies of this album when it came out. And I also think that the tone of this record was a bit different. The days of werewolves, bats and monsters was definitely over here. And it's also worth noting that a few of the songs was co-penned by Lemmy Kilmister on this record, but the majority of the album was written by Ozzy, Zakk Wylde and Randy Castillo. It's a very solid album overall, even if it's a bit on the commercial side. So, next. In 4th place we have Bark at the Moon from 1983. And this was the first Ozzy album after the tragic death of Randy Rhoads. And Jake E. Lee was the guitarist chosen to replace Randy. The band also got a new drummer in Tommy Aldridge. The album kicks off with the title track that became an enormous hit, but after that the album is a bit all over the place in my opinion, because there is a bigger emphasis on synthesizers on this record, and I really think it hurts the album. Now You See It, Now You Don't, for example, would have been a much better song if it wasn't completely drenched in those synthesizers. And I don't know if it's just me, but this album feels like it was inspired by Michael Jackson's Thriller with the werewolf theme, those big synthesizers and this kinda pop sound. Don't get me wrong here, this is of course way more metal than Michael Jackson's album, but maybe this is the metal version of Thriller. Let me know if you guys also see it, or if it's just me. And in 3rd place we have the first solo album from Ozzy Osbourne titled Blizzard of Ozz, which was originally intended to be the name of the group, and this album came out in 1980, the same year as Black Sabbath released Heaven and Hell with Dio, so there was definitely some rivalry between Ozzy and his former bandmates. A battle that Black Sabbath won in my opinion, because I think that Heaven and Hell is the best Black Sabbath album of all time. But Blizzard of Ozz is definitely a contender, but it's far from a perfect album in my opinion. First of all, it's not a heavy album, only about half of the songs on Blizzard of Ozz are metal songs. And the album kicks off with I Don't Know, which is one of my favorite Ozzy songs. And that track leads us into Crazy Train, which became a monster hit. And Randy Rhoads delivers some cool riffs in that song, but it's kinda soft even if Randy goes crazy on that guitar. And Goodbye to Romance is a ballad, not really my thing, but hey. And then we have Suicide Solution, which is one of the better songs on the album, and Mr. Crowley was of course a huge hit from this record, with its rather creepy intro. And the No Bone Movies and Steal Away the Night are like 2 up-tempo party songs. And I would love to see a little more darkness and heaviness to this record, but you can't deny the impact this album had at the time of its release. This was 1980, the same year as Iron Maiden album debuted, so this is legendary stuff. Next. In 2nd place we have The Ultimate Sin from 1986. And when this album came out, it was criticized for being some sort of glam metal record, but I don't think that reflects that much in the music itself. I mean, if you look at Ozzy for example, he dyed his hair blonde and started wearing some colorful glammed up outfits. So I think that a lot of the criticism was mainly on the superficial level. Sure, a song like Shot in the Dark had its big sing-along chorus, but Otherwise, I think that this is one of the heavier Ozzy albums actually. The title track The Ultimate Sin has some real tasty riffs from J.K. Lee for example. And The Secret Loser, Never Know Why, Thank God for the Bomb and Lightning Strikes are all solid songs in my opinion. So, next. And the greatest Ozzy Osbourne album is in my opinion Diary of a Madman from 1981. And I think that this album is more of a metal album in comparison to their debut Blizzard of Ozz. It's heavier and the songwriting is top notch here as well. The album kicks off with Over the Mountain, which is one of the best Ozzy songs of all time. I also like You Can't Kill Rock and Roll, SATO and the title track Diary of a Madman. And this album feels more complete. It's more of a band that delivers on this record. While on their debut it felt more like a Randy Rhoads and Ozzy Osbourne jam. But unfortunately this ended up being the last Ozzy album to feature Randy Rhoads, because he passed away some 6 months after this album was released, in that horrible plane crash. And he was, besides Ozzy, the main focal point of the band, and after that the chemistry between Ozzy and all future guitarists never fully managed to recreate the same magic in my opinion. So here we have my full ranking of Ozzy's discography. I do prefer the first half of his catalog, like most Ozzy fans I guess, because he has a very varied discography. There are some great songs mixed with some radio friendly material and some cheesy ballads, and in the more recent years it got more down-tuned and heavier. And I think it was for the better that Ozzy left Black Sabbath back in 1979, because we wouldn't have had a Blizzard of Ozz or a Diary of a Madman or even a Heaven and Hell if Ozzy wouldn't have been fired. I mean, the man has sold over 100 million records in his lifetime, so he has had a remarkable career that has spanned for some 50 plus years now. But now I'm curious to hear about your opinions on Ozzy's discography, and feel free to post your favorite Ozzy albums down below, or rank their full discography if you're familiar with it. It's always great to hear your guys' feedback. And don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new. And if you wanna support my work, then I'll suggest that you become a Patreon like these fine gents. Or you could always check out my merch store, it's all listed down below. And I'm also on Spotify, Discord and Facebook, so check those out as well. And let me know whose discography I should take on in the next episode of Rank 'Em All. And that's all folks, thanks for watching and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye bye.